Hello, it's Joey, and today I'm making these abundantly interesting and super fun collage strips for our junk journals. They're covered with paper strips, so little bits of book pages, all of those little bits of paper that are left over from our projects and we don't know what to do with. I have lots of these and this project is fantastic for using them up. Each of the collage strips has a few little labels on them for that curious factor, and I've added focal points. So on this one, for example, I have a butterfly, a nice large mushroom and an insect, but you can use any of your supplies and just add whatever you like. On this one I have a bird and I've also added a few little sequins. So they're great for using in our junk journals, and the way that I would use them is maybe to cover up a plain pocket or any other item of ephemera. So you could add one to the front of a pocket like this, or if you're struggling for what to put on a page, what to add, and you don't really know what to reach for, then make up a whole batch of these and then reach for one to cover a page like this. So this would go, for example, on a page here, and it could either go as a really interesting belly band or you could stick it down in its own right and it would decorate a page. So as well as being very satisfying to make, very quick and easy because we're using up our scraps, they're just a lot of fun. I have some process steps to make things really easy, so feel free to take a screenshot of these and let's get on and make some lovely collage strips for our junk journals and use up some of our waste supplies. One of the reasons this project came about is to make a dent in my various little containers of scraps, and I have them building up. They come from book pages and little bits of scrapbook paper, little bits of digitals, there's all sorts in these, and I really wanted to make some kind of reduction, some inroads into them and use them in a constructive and productive way. I was watching Rachel, Roxy Creations, have a go at making something a little bit similar on vellum, and she used her supplies. Now I don't have vellum and I don't have any of the supplies that she used, or at least not very many. So I'm going to use different things and come up with something a bit different, but it's definitely been inspired by Rachel. Also, I was recently having a go at Page in my glue book, and it's a little bit of a continuation of some of the collaging that I've been enjoying doing in this. So this page here is my monthly challenge that I've just done. So there's a little bit of a flavour of that in the decoration on each of these strips. What I thought I'd do is show you what's on my desk, because these alternative supplies, and there are quite a few of them, are just spread out around me. So rather than bring them all onto here under the camera, I thought I would bring the camera over my desk and you can see the whole range of things that I've laid out. I've got some strips of paper that I'll be using for the backing here, and I'll talk about what choices are good for those and what sizes. Here are those little bits of scrap. I've also got around me some paints that I might use for splatting, so I've got some gold and some nice vibrant colours. I have a lovely pot here of my probably most popular and favourite washi tapes that I'm using at the moment for my various autumnal projects. And just to the left of it I've got another container with a few digitals and sentiments that I really like to use, and those are from the lovely Andrea Artie Mays. I've got some strips of, it's French ephemera paper I think it's called, from Tracy Fox. I'm going to bring text into this as well as using book pages and scraps of paper. You can see some glue there and a paintbrush and some water, some of my nice stamps. I have some other labels here, and I've particularly chosen some with letters and numbers and some black outline. Here's a few more that I have just put in a little ramekin pot to keep them tidy. And on the left I've got, well, probably the most important box is this one, which is meant to be my box of neutrals. Lots of bits of scraps in there, and I'm going to be tearing those up even more, but I'm going to make a dint into those. And then if I need them for extra focus, extra detail on these collage strips, I've got some extra bits of label there. Obviously, as well as these, I've got some book pages and some little bits of scrap book paper which I like to integrate, so I'll just show you those. These are some of the bits of scrap paper that I've been using to just rip bits off and add to, so all sorts of, but aren't they just lovely colours? And I've got some dots there, some more book pages. This is a page I was splatting with extra gold and green and some deep red just to give that a bit of an autumn vibe, some bright colours there, and those are some of my own images I've printed on book page. And I like to rip these sorts of things up and use them as decoration, so we've got those to play with. And of course what I want to use up more are some of my book pages, and these are some of my book pages that might get a bit of shredding today. So let's get on and make one of these, and then we can think about the different ways of adding extra focal point as well and detail. For the base of each of these, I've been using, I'm going to call it unloved scrapbook paper and cardstock, and would you believe it, I actually started my first example here with the butterfly was actually a piece of floral ribbon. So I've been having a go at taking things off my shelves that I've not been using. This is quite thick and it has texture. It's rather bright, but I do like orange for a bit of an autumn vibe. So I cut a piece of that 12 inches long, and it's just over 2 inches wide, and it worked quite well. But I thought maybe I could improve by using some scrapbook paper. So I pulled out one in a colour that I felt was good for autumn, but not necessarily in a pattern that I would use. So stars is not really my vibe, not really what I typically use, but the paper's actually really good quality. And then with some other examples, I've moved on to what I'd call light cardstock, and this one has a beautiful mottle in it. So any of these sorts of papers or light cardstock would do. And what you need is, for these, about a 2-inch width, and I'm making them up in 12-inch strips. So really good if you've got some of that unloved scrapbook paper that is too good to just get rid of, but you're not going to use the pattern in anything else. So this is now 12 inches or thereabouts. There we go, 12 inches by about 2. Rough measures. Obviously you could make them shorter, but if you do a nice long one, you've got the opportunity then to cut them up and do whatever you like with them. What we're going to do is add a base layer to begin with our lovely little strips of various styles of paper. And it really is a way of, there's a little bit of alchemy that goes on here, a bit of magic with the mixture of scraps of paper and book pages, and even little bits of offcuts, little tear-offs from IKEA and Amazon packing paper, which if you've been here before you know I love to use, and I would love to know if you use it too. Let's try and make a bit of space. I think I will use one of my liquid glues for speed. If you choose a very lightweight piece of paper or cardstock, you might want to use a dry glue, and I might alternate and choose one of those later. What we're going to do is lay down some narrow strips lengthwise. So I'm going to start with a nice easy base layer. Shall we see if it's on the instructions? Select a base piece of card or thick paper, 12 inches by 2, and lay down a base of small strips of scraps. So get your little pots, your bags, your various bits of scraps out and let's go. I'm going to go for it in neutral colours because that gives us a really great background for then adding middle and top layers of interest and pattern or colour and definition. We're going to add different fonts and textures. I'll talk about overhanging the paper over the edge of the strip, and also a tip is to leave space and not cover the whole thing. So let's get going and have a go at covering some of our rather bright orangey yellow paper here. So this, I think, came in a set of, I don't know, 100 and odd sheets. And in fact with that one, what I like to do, I'll go for some overhang. I'm also going to get rid of some of that blank at the edge. Let's just keep going. It is a bit faster with the liquid glue, isn't it? It's not always great to use a liquid glue. Now I'm going to use my under-over technique. So when I put my glue on, I'm not going all the way to the edge of these pieces of paper, and that is quite important in this collage strip. I do like the text to be the same direction, so if I was reading it this way I could read it. I don't really want them, I might have it horizontal and vertical, but I'm not particularly keen on them being any which way. Can go on there. And one of the things I like to do, and you can't really see it because they're so busy and so much fun, but I do want the various pieces of this backing to connect. So I want the pieces of paper to be able to chatter to each other by touching and nudging up to each other. I also am aware that I'm picking up pieces of book pages that are very similar here, and I want some variety. So I am going to have a little rummage in my other pot. I've got 2 of these. So let's see what's landed in this one. I also think it's okay to have a style of white background. So this one I think is Spanish Dictionary. So that's okay too. It doesn't all need to be a vintage colour. And I'm just going for some sort of coverage whilst leaving some gaps. And I just like, even though it's rather modern colour, I like a little bit of the rather naughty yellow to peep through. I do think this kind of brown packing paper is unbelievably valuable when it comes to collage. Do you use it? And if so, what in? Let me know in a comment. Are you a brown paper packaging fan? Really, I should burst into song at that point, but you really don't want to hear that. There's a bit of book page, nice different colour. And I'm starting to think with this quantity now building up, I'm thinking that I need to be careful that I don't overfill it. You see how quick and easy it is to do. So just vertical, and definitely letting those pieces hang off the edge, because one of the joys is seeing the shape change from our mostly and almost regimented torn side to something with a rather more random character, which is so much more interesting, isn't it, when we use this in our junk journal. I think this was a napkin. Nice long pieces, so the width of a book page is perfect, and you can see how we very quickly can build up a bit of coverage with some variety. That's got a different font on it, that's great. I'm going to get rid of that extra piece at the end. Just going up the middle because I'm going to tuck things under from side to side, and I want to still be able to do that. And just a little bit of overlap. Have we got any more? Oh, there's a nice interesting piece. That's a bit of painted paper from another project. I think I might have used that in my snippets. These are a little bit like short fat snippets, aren't they, with some rather chunky decoration on top. But I'm not sewing today, so it's a sewing free project, and doesn't it feel good when we use up our scraps? It's a little bit more. I know what this piece is. Isn't it sad when you've got tiny bits of scrap and you know which project they came from? Yes. I think this was from when I made a heart and sewed down the middle and did some collage with that, and I'd added some texture and colour to the book page, and I think this was a little bit that was left over. I didn't throw it away. So how are we doing? We've got quite a bit on there. Let's just have a little look. I think maybe a tiny bit more, but not much, or we might be at risk of overdoing it. So I'm going to use some of these teeny tiny pieces. That's a gorgeous colour. I wonder if I can work that in. So I think I will also add some little bits that peep out the side here. So I'm already going for a tuck in. I'm going underneath. And I think a tiny bit more of this. Where should we go? In here. Yes, I think that's a nice little parking space for a piece of brown. And then I'm going to stop on a base layer because I still want to see some of this orangey background peeping through. So that's the base layer done. Used up a few scraps, no noticeable dint, never mind, maybe if I made another 10. It is a good way of using them up. It's a great way to feel like you're making best use of particularly vintage book pages. So we're going to move on to the middle layer. And what I like to do is add labels, so with interesting script. If you've got something like this, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to try to continue to work with a particular colour palette. So having used just a nice set of neutrals here, I've got lots of choices, but I'm going to be mindful of limiting to just a couple of colours as we build up the middle and top layers. And I think it's that really keeps us having a cohesive, beautiful pattern of collage strip. So let's work with a few labels on here and just build that up. So again, let's move into I've got a few here, and I seem to have some here as well, which is very me that they start to build up in more than one place. Everything has a life of its own in my craft room. And with these, again, I'm going to run the text lengthwise. Not always, but sometimes, and hopefully some of these little pieces will still allow me to tuck underneath. And we start to get that sense of layering coming through. So what else have we got? Let's have a look in this one. If I've got a really big piece or a big label like that, I'm going to rip it down the middle, because it's all about getting that sense of length and not cutting across it yet. So maybe a little bit here. Can I tuck under? Yes, I can tuck under there. Another bit of layer. And I'm starting to think about colour, and maybe because I've got warm yellowy orange and I've got a little bit of this pinky red coming through, I'm going to start to allow myself to build in a little bit of colour from the labels in similar shades. So it just it sort of happens, doesn't it, what sort of pattern and colour palette you choose. It isn't always intentional. I'm going with the flow, tucking underneath where I can. Will it let me under? Yes, I think I can just get under there. That's good. Filled in a little bit of space. I've still got that sense of it running up and down. And as I add these, neutrals are also great. If they're little ones, not very big, not very wide, I will start to add them horizontally. So this is a good example. It's not a huge one, so it wouldn't be very long if I ripped it lengthwise. I will start to add little pieces, and again tucking under but letting them just overhang over the side like that. That's a gorgeous little one, and he happens to have a red border, so that's lovely detail. Small is good. Small is good, which for someone who's 5'2", I tried to tell myself when I was young. So there we go. Keep adding, keep adding. I really like this one. It's got digits on. Trying not to go to the edge each time because I might want to tuck under with that, and trying to just look along the whole thing and spread them out. So we want overhang on the left, on the right, at the top and at the bottom. It starts to look really interesting, doesn't it? I really love these. I have to say, the labels from Tracy Fox are some of the most useful pieces of paper I have in my craft room. That's quite a big overhang. Might just help it a bit off there, but it's got digits on, which is great. Okay, doing okay. So I wonder what my other colours will be. So I've got some orangey red. I really like my bold words at the top. Lovely. In fact, I might go like that over the whole. I think it's really good to have some strong text at the top here. What else is? Whoops, have a look in here. I'm trying to not repeat as well. I don't want to have the same label twice, that wouldn't be great. So being quite careful about that. Be good on there. And I've still got some of my orange peeping through, which is good, but I've got all that sense of layering. Maybe one more. What do we think? One more? Two more? Oh, I'm going to add some numbers. Found a number and I can't resist it. I do think it's good to add a few. Let's make it really strong up here. And I think that will be visible if we add a focal point. So that can go on there. In fact, I've seen some here, so I'm going to have, I don't want the same number, so let's have one of these. So the number's in red, and the outline of this one is black. So I'm getting a mixture of text, a mixture of font, and I'll go over a junction. There we go. Let's go over a junction of this and this, spreading them out. Not too bad actually, that might be enough at this stage. So let's see where we're up to. So we've added a middle layer with labels, with interesting script and numbers. We've done that. We've stayed within a colour palette. I think black is allowed. And I've used or created different shapes and adhered off the side. We're absolutely cruising. So now we can move on to a top layer with small details, and for that we can use some of the things I did use and play with when I was adding and making this collage page in my glue book come together. So some of the techniques of stamping and splatting paint I'm going to have a play with, and maybe some washi. So let's have a go at that. Maybe just a quick close-up of how we've got to where we've got to so far. So for the top level of detail, I think my order of events will be maybe a tiny bit of paper from that pile you saw earlier. I've just pulled a few little pieces out. Then I'm going to play with some of my pieces of washi, and I've got a selection here in greens. I've got some oranges in here, and I think I've also got my little delicate black ones, which I think I'll have a play with too. And then I'll do some paint splatting and add the focal point at the end. So I just wanted to enhance this a tiny bit, and it's almost like making your own washi. So I'm tearing the most narrow piece off a piece of black cardstock, black paper. And this has got, let's see if I can, and this has got splats of gold on it that I did just playing with some, I think it was this one. So my Stationery Pal selection of very messy but gorgeous gold paints. I think I also played with the equivalent, I can see copper on here, so I added some splats. These don't look coloured, do they? But they are. That says opal copper, opal gold, opal green. So I think I may have a discount code for these if you check the video description box down below. So you can make your own special papers. And there is something very magical about adding little strips of black, because they really make the rest of a design pop. I don't even know where I'm putting this yet, but I'm going to glue it up with a dry glue and see if we can just add that. Is there a place to tuck it? So maybe under this, turn it that way. That works for me. And what it will do is just bring a bit of emphasis to this end. Maybe I can balance it with something at the top. So it brings your eye all the way up, a bit of overlap there. Just the mildest little pieces. Does it look a bit bereft in the middle? Do we need a tiny bit there? Literally, tiny amounts. Yeah, like that. Magic, isn't it? And I'm going to be very naughty, rip into this nice little piece of 3x4 and see if I can just add an element of humour to the page. It goes with the colour behind, so it ought to be able to work up into there very nicely. I'm not really breaking up the colour palette. Where can this little chap go? Maybe even shorter. I think it's quite a strong pattern, so I only want little pieces of it, and hopefully when I add a focal point these little flashes will still be available to see. There's always a risk that we cover bits up, but it doesn't really matter. You can't over design these things and sit and plan too much, can you? You've got to go with the flow. It's part of the fun. Tiny bit down here, do we think? The merest tiny bit. Maybe here, and I can see I can tuck that under there. Bit fiddly. Yeah, just about still on camera. Working it up. And then I am going to, I think I'll add my washi next. Let's just pull a few out. What might we use? I'm seeing a bit of green, so maybe my palette is the orangey colours, the red and the green. It sounds a bit bright, doesn't it? But let's see what we can do. I've got a very nice deep green washi, and again I'm going to just rip a narrow strip and add that. Rip a strip, keep it nice and thin, not too much science, maybe a bit up there. Spread them out, maybe a bit on here, and it's the variety I think that really makes this. Okay, I've got to have some picket fence, and at this stage I'm going to go horizontally, so I am going to make a change. Maybe there. I did find when I made up a few of these that you can overthink where some of these pieces of washi need to go, and actually when you have a bit of randomness just thrown into your process, don't think too much, you can end up with the most interesting results. So I do encourage you to just don't think too much sometimes, just let it happen, she said, making a tiny adjustment there. Picket fence washi. Bit naughty, I've got two pieces next to each other. I think that's okay. A little cluster, maybe some of my squiggle. Vary up the pattern. These are really easy to tear, they're super sticky, and they're delicate, which I think is great for adding pattern. How are we doing? Yes. Oh, I just love it. Love it. I think Tina Shabby Dabby Doodah would be good at making one of these. Shall we ask her to have a go? See what we can do. So I think I've got enough on. So what I will do is take a look around me and find my little stamps. So I've got postmark stamps. Somewhere here I have a few ink pads, and I'm just wondering with this selection of colours which one I should go for. I might have a go with this one. This is a very old, I'll show you the lid, Kaleido raised rainbow dye ink pad, and the mix of colours, there's a mixture of ink pads in here. It's called, what was that called? Autumn Leaves. I quite like the red at the top, so I will, in fact, I do better if I start with the circle, and I should really have something behind me. And I definitely want the circle to go over the edge. And the other thing I like to do is just stamp with very little on it. So there's just the merest hint in some places. And then I can go back in with my wiggly postmark lines. It's very tempting to do too much of this. I don't know about you. It's very tempting to do a lot. Okie dokie. So what I'm going to do now is what I've done on a couple of these already, and add some splats of gold, but also a couple of other colours. And the colours I like to add are the merest hint of a few dots of black, which you might be able to see here, and then a third colour that goes with whatever the selection of colours we've used are. So I'm going to pick gold, black, and I think green, and just do some really tiny splats on this one here. And this is how I do it. I have a little cardboard box. I've got a ramekin of water, and I'm going to take my gold to begin with. I really like this deep antique gold, and there's lots of mica in it and it's quite creamy, so that's going on. In fact, what I might do is I'm going to hit something, not someone, hit something to get that to just give up its little drops of beauty. Get that on. It's a far easier thing to do and a lot messier if you can actually put it in a cardboard box and do your dots into it. I've got quite a few dots on my sewing machine before now, and go in some different directions too. Oops, on the box there. Right, plenty of gold on that. I'm going to go in with a little bit of this gorgeous green, which I love using. Very creamy, maybe a bit of yellow. It's got a mix of those autumn colours now. We've got gorgeous gold, we've got browns in there, some neutrals, some black, and a little bit of cheeky orange peeping through. And then I'll just have a tiny amount of the black, and this is where we are going to have to be rather careful because it's very bold when it comes out. We want just a few dots, and it's all about adding detail. Ooh, nice big splat. That's okay, 1 or 2 big splats is fine. There we go. So that can come out, and we will take a peek at it, and then we can choose a focal point. So some suggestions for a focal point: you could carry on with the autumnal theme and maybe have something like this owl, and what I've done on this one is just roughly tear around it so that it was a bit more proportionate to the size of the strip. Otherwise it would be rather too dominant, I think, if I just put that on, but you could do. I also have an eagle here, and he would work really well. I think these are from the Etsy shop of a lady called, I think it's Lucy, Irresistible Prints. You could add a bird, just a simple bird, that would work really well. And I've chosen, I think I'll pick some of my nice little mushrooms and butterflies, and is it a dragonfly? I'm not even sure what that is. What is that? Drop me a comment below, what is that one? So I like these because they're beautifully bold, they're about the right size, and they've got black in, which is great because it then complements the black that we added before with our black dots and bits of paper. But I would recommend that you use something which can be 3D, because I think that's where the magic happens on these. So 1 or 2 of your little focal points could have wings, for example, or be raised somehow. So that can go in the middle, a lovely mushroom, and I think this can go pointing in another direction with its wings up. Collage strips from paper scraps for use in our junk journals. Check out my video where I make another page in my glue book, which is part of a series. If you like collaging, then I think you'd love making a page with me every month in my glue book, so do come along with me for that, and I hope to see you soon.